Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So, welcome everyone. At the beginning of the sit, it was stated that silence is the essential nature of all compounded phenomenon. Silence, denoted by the words essential, nature, is the simplest and most direct and most natural state of existence. When the complexity that is phenomenon is greeted with a kind of neutrality. Once we're able to simply be here, now, in the presence of whatever phenomenon are here, there's a kind of neutrality that's there, a non-reactivity. It's not a denial or a refusal to accept whatever's here. It's a simple neutrality, the kind of outlook that says, all of this is acceptable. When the mind becomes stable, it becomes non-reactive, and it experiences itself as the deep silence of the heart. And so in a way, you can say that our practice is simply to become aware in a natural, open, heartfelt engagement with all phenomenon without attachment, so that life can flow like a river. So that all experiences in the waking state can rise spontaneously, flow for as long as they want, and then are let go. As we continue with this practice, there is this sense of a kind of neutrality toward all phenomenon that comes. But this neutrality doesn't make us unable to enjoy or unable to experience directly what's happening. It doesn't stop us from being able to engage spontaneously with whatever's here now. It simply removes the ego from the equation, permits us to live freely with whatever's here. Letting the phenomenon come and go like the waves that crash on the shore at the beach and then retreat. All phenomenon are like this. By compounded phenomenon, of course, I mean all of the experiences we have that are related to the senses. So whatever comes through sight, sound, touch, mind, all of these experiences are compounded. In other words, they depend one upon another. But the first, or the foundation for all of these experiences, is the silence of pristine awareness itself, which is here before all else. Without awareness, nothing else is known. This is why our practice keeps pointing us back toward this prior awareness, this awareness which remains neutral toward whatever phenomenon are here now, and thereby giving us the opportunity to simply flow with what is rising and falling, and responding spontaneously to whatever is here without attachment to an outcome. By doing this, we're able to know that the heart of our being is peace, quiet, silence, and a certain kind of contentment. And we're not tossed about by the waves that come and go naturally. As long as we have a body and a mind, the waves of life will come and go. It is through the recognition that we are this silent awareness that we're able to not cling as life continues moment by moment. By not clinging, we are in some very deep way able to remain happy wherever we are, whatever we're doing, or whatever we are required to do. We've all noticed that sometimes life simply requires that we do things that we might prefer not to, whether it's our work or something in our family or something in our life that we feel called to do, gaining some type of education. Or these things come and go, and at times we think to ourselves that we'd rather not do this. And yet we see that at the moment, it's unavoidable. We're required somehow to simply engage spontaneously with whatever is here. The happiest way to do this is to not have an opinion about it. This doesn't mean that at some point it won't change and that our desire to stop doing something or to stop being something or to stop being in a particular place, job, relationship, and so on. It doesn't mean that this desire won't arise. It simply means that we are willing to wait to do what's required of us now, in this moment, in this spontaneous engagement with life as it's rising, and that we can wait on the will of heaven for our further desires to manifest in their own time. Mind is a very creative tool, what we focus on, what we desire, will sooner or later come to be. A lot of us spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, many days, weeks, months, trying to make something happen, some idea in the mind to bring it to fruition. Of course, there's nothing wrong with this, but we often notice that what we experience as a result of this effort is a lot of frustration. And in doing so, we miss the happiness of our own silence. So, all I'm encouraging you to do here is to notice that when desire arises, rather than pushing, struggling, seeking, you can return through neutrality to the silence of your own being, giving your desire up to silence. In doing so, you sit aware and poised for the moment when the desire, which has been placed out into the universe, can manifest in its own time, without your push, without the ego's demand that something happen. At the moment that change is about to occur, if you are poised in this way, in awareness, in the silence of being, when the opportunity arises for change, when this comes, you'll simply step into the change quite naturally. So keep returning to silence while you wait for change to occur. Because the one thing that we know for sure is that whether we do something or do nothing, change will occur. Because this is the nature of life, isn't it? Change is always coming and going. The key to happiness in the midst of all of this change is to keep returning to the silence which is your own nature as being, consciousness, and bliss. So your microphones are off. If you'd like to speak with me, please turn on your microphone. Or if you'd rather not talk, you can send me a note in the chat and I can read it.
Rishi, can I say something?
Yes?
Now, for some time, there is this something is like not just interested in speaking anymore. It's like it's like so much of effort to even speak.
Yes.
Just wanted to, because you talked about it, so I just wanted to bring this forward to you that this is, and I am with my parents and uh, other family members, and even I go to attend office. So movement is there, but there's like very strong urge to be quiet more than to speak.
Yes, this is beautiful, Kamal. This is the natural outcome of this recognition of silence, which is deep within. The question for you might be, now that this return to silence is being experienced directly, does it set up just another form of identification? In other words, before there was mm, uh, maybe a clinging to conversation, activity, engagement, and so on with other people, with the family. There was a clinging to that. But now that you've released that form of clinging and the natural silence that begins to come, begins to rise, are you now, when you are in the presence of other people or in the presence of the need to engage or communicate or talk, are you now clinging to this silence? This is just something to look at, because what comes when we are naturally engaged with silence is there isn't any impediment to the engagement with other people, to talking and so on, when it comes quite naturally. But what can happen is that the residual component of personality can simply begin to resist then the engagement that wants to happen naturally. And this is, of course, just another way of seeing that ego, that which identifies with body and mind as the real, um, it simply is beginning to substitute one form of identity as the communicator for another form of identity as the silence. So it's just something to look at. It's not something to worry about or be too overly concerned about, because it's quite natural in our experience with people day to day, unless we're completely alone and in silence somewhere. It's quite natural for us to feel what you're feeling, which is, oh, I must engage with what's going on around me, but I don't really feel like it. Um, and this is okay too, but just be aware that we don't want to identify with the silence as a personality trait. We want the silence to be the natural state. And in the natural state of silence, it's quite possible to engage momentarily, to engage directly in the moment with whatever arises, and at the same time to be able to notice that the deeper silence is still there. So rather than maybe feeling as though, oh, I don't want to talk, or I don't want to do this, or I shouldn't do this. This sometimes comes up for people too. oh, I should be quiet all the time, I should be silent all the time in order to experience this ongoing recognition of my own silence. I shouldn't be speaking quite so much, and so on. Rather than allowing the mind to go in that direction, just keep it aware that underneath whatever communication is there as required um, by our interactions with, after all the beings around us are only God anyway. So there is some need to interact with them and to have some relationship with them at certain moments. It doesn't mean we can't walk away when we feel like we've really had enough and we need to come into silence because we're just being dragged back into the world of mind again. But we still can allow ourselves to walk away from the world of mind when it's when other people are contributing to that, or we can just remain silent in their presence and see what happens. It is true that once we've touched silence deep within our own being and it becomes our dominant characteristic, we're quite able to be fully attending in the world and yet remaining very quiet. And we can often see that what happens is that we come into an environment where things feel like they are very active and very busy and very, but our presence in that environment generates an energy field that we begin to notice almost right away, that people begin to calm, people begin to quiet, and that the silence which we are aware of within our own being begins to spread among those that we are with. And sometimes it spreads in terms of people just get quieter, and other times it just changes the quality of the conversation so that the quality of the conversation is uplifted in that moment. So just allow yourself to be aware of this silence. And then if you need to speak, speak, but speak from silence, from this inner knowing. Yes? Thank you, my dear. Yes?
I have
Hello?
a, I have a simple question, but it's quite mysterious for me. What is the nature of the bliss for you? Or you can say, I think, for you. So,
What is the nature of bliss? Yeah, this is a good question. It's an interesting question because when we read about the experiences of sages and so on, it's often about, often a kind of a misconception that bliss is some sort of happy state in the mind that is there, you know, as a consequence of having achieved something, that we come into this sort of permanent state of uh, happiness in some way, and that we never ever again experience sadness or loss or grief or anything like that. But this is not exactly correct. Um, in the statement that you are being, consciousness, bliss, it's not implied that you're in a perpetual state or a constant state of happiness where you are always smiling and laughing and dancing in some way. What's really being pointed toward, and this is something that I can say I've experienced myself, is that when we are in this state of aware, here, now, resting in the heart, open. This is being, what is also called the self, that this is the natural state. And that when we are resting in the heart, there's this profound recognition that everything is consciousness, that there is nothing separate. So there's a unification that happens within oneself, that that which I am is all of this. All of this is myself. This is being and consciousness, when they are recognized or realized to be the natural state of all beings. This experience is what is usually referred to as bliss. But it may not result in someone who is happily dancing underneath the tree 24 hours a day. The recognition of being and consciousness in a way you can say it simply means I am no longer afraid. There is just this recognition that all of this is that. Everything is unified in the recognition that there is only God. There is only love. That everything that is flowing here and everywhere is that love, being, consciousness. And this recognition is bliss. And this goes on because it's not dependent upon the body, the mind, or the immediate experience. This is always going on. You can say, perhaps underneath everything that is happening in the world, or in one's life, or in one's mind, or in one's emotion, this recognition is always there. So even though I am weeping over some great loss, there is still this recognition that all of this is somehow perfect. That being and consciousness are dancing in the way that they are supposed to, in their own perfection. And so there is this immediate loss of fear and this immediate recognition that nothing can be lost and nothing can be gained. Everything is as it is, and that which is aware of what is the only thing that is permanent. The only thing that remains after all experiences, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, come and go, is this recognition that I am here as awareness itself. And this is always the foundation of all experience. And when this is a profound and deep recognition, then the consequence of that is what is referred to in the scriptures as bliss.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. So you can say, in a way, when it's possible to experience everything in the waking state, in the dreaming state, and so on, when everything is experienced as free from fear, then the underlying perception or experience is one of bliss. Because it's recognized that all of this, everything that comes, everything that goes, is contributing in some way to this greater recognition that we call awakening or enlightenment. You know, I don't use the term enlightenment much because I don't like it to people to think of it to be something to be strived for, something that's out there in the future somewhere, and something which isn't here now. This is why I often just use awareness itself or consciousness, because we all know in this moment, we know I am here. So we are aware in this moment, in every moment, that awareing is going on. Awareness is here. And we are aware on some very deep and profound level, and I am that which is aware. Without my awareness, none of this is possible. On some very deep, fundamental way, we know this is true. So it's not really about achieving some state in a distant future. It's about recognizing what is here now and is always here under all circumstances, positive, negative, neutral, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, under all circumstances that we are able to experience. The one thing that we can see for sure in the middle of every experience is that I am here. And if we look back on it as a memory, we know, oh yes, during that moment I was there. This is how I have this memory, because I was there. So this I that we're referring to is in one way a limited I, that's the I of the ego, but in another way it is the I of awareness itself, which is not bound by ego, it's free of ego. This I, which we experience in the waking state as awareness itself, this is a much bigger I. This is a much vaster I. Yes. And so we keep coming to that I, but through the question, who am I? Or the recognition, I am aware, or asking the question, am I aware in this moment? We return to the present here and now. This brings us out of the past, stops our projections about the future, ends our seeking, and brings us into the here now. And in the here now, it becomes possible to know ourselves as being free from all ego positions, neutral toward all that is rising, and that is the moment in which we recognize that what is here as the foundation of all experience is consciousness itself. Now, there is the experience of bliss, and this can be a very, very blissful experience, especially in the beginning. The very first time we come into the recognition that I am being and consciousness. We don't need to say I am bliss, because bliss just becomes overflowing. It flows out through the heart because that is its nature. So then we know for sure that I am that which is eternal, unborn, undying. And this is the consequence we call bliss. This is the result of that experience. Now we live happily, free of fear, knowing that that which I was seeking, I have found. And everything just continues on at that moment, as it's bound to do, until this body and this mind dissolve. Everything just keeps coming and going.
And are there any change in the body's energetic body or physical body due to the awareness and the state of bliss permanently established in you? I think here, for example, illnesses or things like this, because I have read a lot of things about and it's not evident. So I'm just curious your experiences about that.
Yes, so there are two things, there are two responses to that question or statement. One is yes, there can definitely be physical changes in the physical body, absolutely. Some of you know the story that I tell sometimes of this recognition of being and consciousness as bliss. Um, I had many glimpses of this for many years as time went on. You know, as a practitioner, we get small glimpses of this. But it really was at the time that I was uh, living, you know, primarily in and around hospitals and going through cancer treatment. And there was a very clear recognition that the end was coming, that the end was here, not even coming, that the end was here. There was this day-to-day recognition that the body was dying. So there was for me, because I was a practitioner and the stories come of Sri Ramana and his death experience, where he simply said, okay, this body is dying and it'll go to the burning ground and it will be cremated. And until that time, I am just watching, and what I can see, this was his words and my paraphrase, but this was the idea. He said, so this body is dying, and yet somehow I feel the full force of this I. And I can see and I know directly that this I that I experience as awareness or consciousness is not dependent on this body. So this body can go, no problem. It can go, they can burn it, but I remain. And so I took this, you know, literally. This was his experience, and he very clearly illuminated it. And so this became my constant companion during this time, which lasted for about a year and a half, where I was in and out of hospitals and going through chemo and you know, radiation and things, and lost the ability to speak and to eat. And so there was this very pointed recognition that I only had a very short period of time in which to understand that the body could go, and that I was that which it was aware. And I have a very vivid memory of there being a very precise moment when in some way that was fully understood, and that the experience that he talked about was real, that it was not something that happened in his imagination, and it was not happening in this imagination. So it was very direct. And from that moment on, I began to get more and more healthy. I thought I was dying. I was prepared for that, and I was sure of it. And but I had this very strong desire to finish this course of understanding, of self-knowing, before the body was completely gone. So I became most interested in that. Finish this now. The body is going. Finish this now. This was my constant prayer, you could say. Finish this now. The body is going. I don't have time. Finish this now. And from that moment of recognition that there is only being, consciousness, I was in a very difficult physical situation. So I can't say that I was happy and I was dancing in bliss. But I know that the moment that this recognition of myself as oneself, as being consciousness, when this flowered, there was a moment of bliss. And from that moment, the healing began to happen. And the body began to come back. It still took another year after that for the body to come back to the point that I could call it any kind of something similar to what, you know, I was familiar with before. So yes, it can definitely impact the body and the physical health of the body. But understand that this is also a matter of parabdha karma. The recognition that I am that which is aware, when it's very profound, this is the primary healing. So at the moment that this happens, there's also a deep recognition that the healing has occurred. And it makes no difference whether the body remains or the body goes, because the healing is not in relation to the body. It's in relationship with the desire which has been formulated throughout a lifetime to recognize the truth of one's being, to put this body to its fullest use. Once that has been attained or recognized or realized, then there's no more use for the body. So there's not any interest in whether the body continues or it doesn't continue. In fact, it can actually go in the opposite direction. You can be prepared for the body to go, and for many of us, right, we've had a long lifetime of suffering, and there can be a great sense of, oh, the body is going, finally I'm getting out of this. I'm going, finally this is over. This lifetime which has been so difficult, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever, this can be, finally it is going. Oh, good. There can be a great sense of relief with that. But then if this recognition of oneself as being consciousness and bliss results in the body healing, one can know that one's work isn't done at that time. That for some reason, life wants this body mind to continue. And so there can become a great sadness until there's the recognition that you simply have to live out the parabdha karma of this body. And if this parabdha karma of this body is to go on for another 10 years or another 15 years or whatever, you will go on. But again, at this point, there is no one to really disagree with that. There's just an acceptance. Today the life is going on today. Oh, I'm awake I'm awake this morning. So, okay, now I will do whatever comes throughout this day. So then we can engage spontaneously with whatever's there. But what is gone is the fear. Both the fear of dying and the fear of living. This is a paradox. Many people who are engaged in a life of spiritual pursuit are more afraid of life living, the living part of life, than the dying part of life. So we come only to a place of don't know, and then what to do. We just don't know.
Thanks to share with us that.
Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you, dear ones. Beautiful to see you all again, of course. Thank you for being here today. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityor Mukshiyam Amritawa Swaha Bhuva Bhu Om Sat Jung Hang Om. Namaste.